Welcome to Nice and Blunt. My name's Adam Riancho, and today I'm going to give you 5 ride or die players that I feel like I have to draft this year. One for every position, and then an extra wide receiver as the 5th guy. I don't really want to make this video because I still have to draft in the subscriber league, and now I'm just tipping my hand as to who I want the most. But fuck it. This is what I do for y'all at my own expense. I give you my favorite 5 players to draft in 2024. We begin at the quarterback position where my ride or die is Anthony Richardson of the Indianapolis Colts. I am on the Colts train this year. I think they make the wild card. And while they don't win the division, Shane Steichen is going to make them a buzzsaw this season. You do not want to face the Colts this year with Richardson. And I understand he's a true wild card because he only played in 4 games last year. He only finished 2. He was off the field with a concussion and a shoulder injury in 2 of those games. But when you look at the games he completed, he averaged 24.3 points per game. And I just love his coach. Shane Steichen's one of the best play callers. He will figure this out. I know Richardson is still a little unexperienced, but it doesn't matter. He is just so talented. And whenever Shane Steichen has a good, viable quarterback, it pays dividends in fantasy. Just look at Justin Herbert in 2020, averaging 22.1 points per game. Jalen Hurts in 2021, averaging 20.7 points per game. In year 2 with Shane Steichen, back in 2022, Jalen Hurts averaged 25.2 points per game. And if Richardson does stay healthy, those are the numbers we can project. All 3 of those quarterbacks I just mentioned, as well as Richardson in 2 games last year, was a top 3 quarterback in fantasy points last year if you look at all quarterbacks combined. So there is pretty much no risk, in my opinion. The only risk that you could point to is if he gets hurt again, but I doubt it. I'm willing to bet against it. The quarterback position is also so deep, I really don't give a shit. And his backup is Joe Flacco. Flacco's probably going to light it up this year if he gets the start, like he did in Cleveland. So you'll be fine. You can figure it out. Just drop some fab on Flacco if Richardson does go down. But I think as long as he stays healthy, there's no way he doesn't pay off at ADP. He's going as a top 5 or some places top 6 quarterback. And last year, he averaged 10 rush attempts per game. That should continue. He gave you 9.4 points per game strictly on the rushing stats in his 4 games last season. The sky is the limit. He has the league-winning potential I am after, and especially when you consider that Josh Allen has lost a lot of weapons. Jalen Hurts is likely not going to score as many rushing touchdowns this season. Lamar Jackson is a bit volatile and may miss out on some rushing volume to Derrick Henry. And Mahomes may not bounce back as that elite option. Last year, he was a big letdown in fantasy. There are many scenarios where Anthony Richardson is at worst quarterback 3, if not the QB1 overall this season. The only risk is injury. But let's move over to the running back position, where I think the one guy you should be targeting the most, my ride or die, is Isiah Pacheco of the Chiefs. I'm a Charger fan. It's not fun to say this, but I think for fantasy, you just can't go wrong with Pacheco. McKinnon is gone, and that was really holding him back in terms of fantasy production. Not only that, this offense is definitely going to bounce back and score way more points this year than it did last season. Their offense was kind of shit, in all honesty. But even though the Chiefs do have better wide receivers, Kelsey is going to be 35 years old. Xavier Worthy is a rookie, still unproven. Hollywood Brown is already hurt. And while it is unlikely, Rashee Rice could still possibly get suspended midseason. I'm not going to count on that happening, but still, it is possible. So overall, the player that you can trust the most in the Chiefs offense, other than Mahomes, would be Pacheco. If we look at the 7 games last year where he played without Jerick McKinnon in the regular season, he was getting 21.4 touches per game, 3.6 catches per game, 98 total yards per game and scored 8 touchdowns. That was an average of 18.4 half PPR points per game. And if you also add the 4 playoff games, these are his stats in those: 23.3 touches per game, 3 catches per game, 93 yards per game, and 3 touchdowns. The stats maintained in terms of volume. He did not drop off at all. He averaged 15.3 points per game in those 4. If we combine these 2 sample sizes, we get 11 games where Pacheco was averaging 17.3 points per game. And the only 2 running backs last year with an 11-game sample size that showcased more points per game were Christian McCaffrey and Kyren Williams. That is the list. Nobody else averaged more than 17.3 points per game in at least 11 games last season. The closest guy after that would have been Raheem Mostert, who scored 21 touchdowns, and we all remember was the RB2 on the season in 2023. So Pacheco could be top 3 this year if he stays healthy. If McCaffrey and Kyren go down, he could possibly be the RB1. That's why he's my ride or die at running back. I think he's the most bust-proof candidate, and I don't think I can give you Breece Hall as that option. Breece Hall is a top 3 consensus guy. So I love Breece Hall, but if I'm drafting anybody else, it would be Isiah Pacheco, no matter what. My ride or die at wide receiver is a player I'm kind of tired of talking about. If you've been watching my channel, you probably know exactly who this is. It's Brandon Aiyuk of the San Francisco 49ers, who I think will remain a 49er as every day goes by, as we get closer to week 1. Why would he get traded at this point in time? I think he's just going to sign the contract. It's going to be like Bosa, either last year or the year before. I think it was 2 years ago. Bosa signed like the last weekend before their first game. That's what's going to happen with Aiyuk. I could be wrong, but I'm like 90% sure that it will happen. So I'm just going to bet on it and let the chips fall where they may. These are Aiyuk's stats in 13 games last year where both he and Deebo Samuel were healthy. I think that's the most emblematic sample size to look at from last year. He averaged 14 points per game, only 6.2 targets per game, 4.7 catches per game, 85 yards per game, and 7 touchdowns, an average 18 yards per catch. He was so efficient from a yards per catch standpoint. He put up a total 1,342 receiving yards in 16 games last season on only 105 targets and 75 catches. If he's going to sign a $30 million contract, you know those targets are going up, the catches are going up, and I'm expecting at least 120 targets for him this year. If the efficiency maintains, he could put up 1,500 plus yards this season. That would not shock me at all, especially if Deebo were to miss any time. Deebo did miss some games last year. If you look at last year's stats as well, Deebo scored a total 12 touchdowns. Aiyuk only scored 7. And if Aiyuk is now their highest paid guy, wouldn't their roles kind of flip? And it's kind of reasonable to assume maybe Aiyuk's the guy scoring 12 touchdowns, Deebo scores 7. So let's say that does happen. Aiyuk scores 12 touchdowns, and his per-game stats stay the same. They are identical to last year, 4.7 catches for 85 yards per game. That would bump his average up to 15.1 points per game, which last year was good for wide receiver 6 on a per-game basis in 2023. So I was not afraid to draft him at all as my wide receiver 9 at the top of round 2 before the trade rumors deflated his ADP. Now that he's a third-round pick, he's a no-brainer. I'm all in. I'm betting on Aiyuk no matter what. My ride or die at tight end, though, my favorite guy to take based on ADP and what I expect from him this season would be Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys. Other than CeeDee Lamb, the only real threat for targets is Brandon Cooks. You can hype up Jalen Tolbert as much as you want, but he's not overtaking Ferguson either. And Cooks, while he's still the number 2 receiver in my mind, I think he will maintain that this year. He turns 31 in September. Ferguson already had 21 more targets than him last season, and the gap should widen even more in 2024. However, Cooks did score 8 touchdowns last year. Ferguson only scored 5, and I would expect those numbers to flip, and Ferguson is now scoring 8 Cooks is closer to 5. So if he gets that 120 target volume, I think is his floor this season. And if every other efficiency stat stays the same with 8 touchdowns, we're looking at 7 targets per game, 4.8 catches per game, 53 yards per game, and an average of 10.5 points per game, which last year ranked as tight end 6 on a per game basis. And to get him at tight end 9 in the ADP is a steal. He should be going above Kyle Pitts, and he is not. I've actually bumped him up above Evan Ingram in my updated tight end rankings. I cannot stop drafting Jake Ferguson. So the Cowboys are a lock to send him a ton of volume. Last year, they were the highest scoring offense in the league. And with Michael Gallup and Tony Pollard leaving this team, there's also 124 targets completely up for grabs that some of them will be going to Jake Ferguson. So he's a lock in my opinion. He's developing a great connection with Dak as well in training camp while CeeDee Lamb holds out. He's clearly their best offensive piece. And in my opinion, he's just a bust-proof pick, the clear number 2 option in a very narrow offense that we all expect to still score a lot of points in 2024. But the last player in this video, my ride or die number 2 at receiver, would be Tank Dell of the Houston Texans. Last year, here are his stats in 10 full games. He averaged 14.2 points per game, 7.5 targets per game, 4.7 catches per game for 76 yards per game, and also scored 7 touchdowns. He was on fire last year. That was wide receiver 7 in points per game. If you cherry pick even further though, and look at his final 4 games, we all know rookies tend to start off slow. Holy shit. This was insane. 10.8 targets per game, 6.3 catches per game, 99 yards per game, and 5 touchdowns. That's an average of 20.6 half PPR points per game. And that was a true league winner if he did not get hurt. That's what he was on pace to do before breaking his leg. He's 100% heading into week 1 this year. The only question mark for him is the fact that the Texans did trade a 2nd round pick to acquire Stephon Diggs. And that's really the biggest variable and question mark regarding Tank Dell's usage this season. But regardless of that, we know for a fact that Stroud loves him. He's been hyping him up. He's one of his best friends, and I don't think that's changing. He's going to throw it deep a ton, and Tank Dell is not a check down guy. He runs deep routes. He was prolific in college, and as long as he stays healthy, I think that's going to continue in year 2 in the NFL. So it's possible that Tank Dell can actually establish himself as the number 1 target in this Texans offense. If that happens, he wins leagues. So I'm genuinely tempted to rank him above Nico Collins. If not for the contract extension that they gave Nico this offseason, I probably would. But I still think Tank is the number 2 receiver for Houston, and projecting 10 plus touchdowns feels like the most likely scenario if he's able to stay healthy. The only question mark there is he's 5'8", 165 pounds, and that's his real big red flag. I'm not worried about Diggs. I'm more so worried about him staying healthy. But as long as he doesn't get hurt, the only way he doesn't pay off is if Stroud is the one who gets hurt. So I love Tank Dell. I was on board with him last year at his undrafted price, and I think he's going to smash this season again. He's my wide receiver 22, and I kind of feel too low. I kind of want to put him inside my top 15. So those are the 5 players I am 100% endorsing no matter what this season. Anthony Richardson at quarterback. At running back, Isiah Pacheco. At wide receiver, Brandon Aiyuk and Tank Dell. And at tight end, Jake Ferguson of the Cowboys. If you notice a trend, I'm betting on good offenses with elite play callers. Maybe Mike McCarthy isn't an elite play caller, but he's won 12 games 3 years in a row, and there's nobody other than Lamb to compete with Ferguson. But otherwise, I'm betting on Shane Steichen, Andy Reid, Kyle Shanahan. And although Bobby Slowick may not have completely proven his name among that group yet, it's still the CJ Stroud offense, and it's going to be really fucking good this season. So I want good players in elite offenses, and I think that's what you're getting with this list of 5. Those are the 5 players that I think you need to draft at all costs. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content. Check out my other videos. You'll see more in-depth analysis on all of my rankings. I've ranked the top 75 receivers, the top 60 running backs, as well as every quarterback and tight end heading into this year. And I can't wait for the season to kick off. It's going to be fun. Join me if you want to win your league. I am going to help you make the playoffs. That is my mission. I promise you that. My name is Adam Riancho, and thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.